Widening social rifts define our era, driven by indignant anger and manipulation through engineered fear and division. To move forward and heal, we need secure men and strong women. But more importantly, we must learn how to listen to each other. As I asked women around me how I could help, I started to understand that the idea I once considered a conclusion was only the beginning.
Women want to be heard, but it's not enough yet. So don't just hear us, but hear us when we say that everything that's happening is not enough to treat us as fully valuable, fully worthy human beings, equal in every way to men.
A unified answer that branches out into infinite diversity with one common factor. The people not listening tend to be men.
But women cannot make men listen, and certainly cannot integrate what they hear into understanding and action. Only men can do that for themselves.
So if men can't listen to women, LGBTQ+, minority groups, or other people with different perspectives, maybe they can listen to a man having a conversation with these people. I'm inviting you into my journey to become a better listener and meet some intriguing people along the way. Welcome back to our conversation with Amber. This will be part 2 of 2. Anyways, jumping right back in. And I think that's actually a really good thing to mention too, because you're talking like there's no specific singular woman. And that is something I learned really early on when I decided to start making this a podcast, is I showed up and I just said, hey, I want to help. What can I do? You know, and in this space, I'm an interloper into this space for sure. I'm totally, this is new to me to a point. I've always been a human rights person, but specifically to like nose to the grindstone on women's rights. I asked, what can I do? And I got so many different answers, and it led me to, this is a key question that I ask all of my guests. It is the closest thing to a mandatory question I have on this entire podcast. It is, women want to be heard as an incomplete sentence. How would you finish it? And you've already answered it. You're in the intro.
Yes, I am. Yeah. I've thought about it lots. I've thought about it a lot since that too, but I still, stand by the things that I said, that it's a matter of that we can't make you believe us, and we can't make you integrate what you're learning. And we need you to be curious about what our experience is like and what it has been like, and not not be offended and feel defensive of that. We're not holding you personally responsible for the history of mankind. We're just trying to do better now with the system that we have, and that we want partners that are equal partners. We want, to have the same kind of mutual respect and understanding, and be able to communicate to divide the mental and emotional labor and physical labor of running a household and raising children, if that's what you choose, but instead of having it be a default parent or rigid gender role expectations. And I think that the queer community has really given us a huge, huge lesson in this, because they didn't have those rigid gender roles of a stereotypical heterosexual relationship of a man and a woman, a wife and a husband, a mom and a dad, that these were the expectations of that the mom cooked dinner every night and did the laundry and the cleaning and raised the children and stuff, that they played to each other's strengths, and they had the communication skills and ability to be like, all right, how is this going to work for us? It doesn't have to work for everybody. It doesn't have to work for anybody else. But for us, how is this going to work? How can we make our relationship work and communicate so that it is as healthy and beneficial to both of us and our family as possible? And I think that that's a really beautiful thing that more and more couples are doing, and especially with like the Fair Play, like shout out to them. Their work is phenomenal and stuff, and giving us the language to have these conversations about the mental load that women carry. And that is, that it's really frustrating that even now, like I've been divorced for 7 years, and I have to text my ex-husband specific requests so that he will parent. And that like I shouldn't have to do it all alone. And it's really frustrating to me that he can just forget it, because he knows it'll get taken care of. They will get to the doctor's appointments. They will get to the dentist appointments. They will get to these things because I will do it. And I will not fail my children. And that's a heavy responsibility to fill. And I don't want to have to do it alone. I had children with a partner with the intent that we would do it together and stuff. And so it's really frustrating for a lot of couples when they're like, well, this is how my parents did it, and this is just the expectation and the norm. And it's like, nope, we've got to reevaluate this. And specifically for us as a couple, if you're better at finances, then let's decide what that's going to look like. And I I actually really love doing the laundry and am very particular about it, like, so I'll take over the laundry, and just like, regardless of gender, it doesn't matter. These are the things that need to be done to have a partnership and a household, and that we need to be better about playing to each other's strengths and communicating wants, needs, and expectations. I think one of the hardest things in relationships is unexpressed expectations will lead to resentment. And resentment will lead to contempt. And Dr. John Gottman said that contempt is the thing that will kill relationships. And so if we don't address these things early, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. And that's perpetuating just so much hurt.
And I think as far as addressing it early, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's important to address it, to model it for your kids, because I'm feeling incredibly grateful that I got the non-conventional upbringing that I did, because I had, and yeah, this is oversimplifying, because there was a lot of time where I wished my parents were still together, but they weren't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I watched two single parents do everything, and the way that I never thought anything was women's work. I never thought anything was men's work. It was just stuff that needed to be done. And I watched my grandfather, who was one of the toughest, most internally secure people I've ever known. He was the one who would spend more time with us grandkids, especially when we were little, because he would have, he'd be silly with us and others. But this is like the toughest, most stoic guy that suddenly switch into this silly, lovable grandfather. And, I got to see such a depth of emotion. And I think that is crucial for our kids, to not ever really see something as this is women's work, this is men's work, because it sets them up to have a more balanced, co-supporting relationship with somebody. Not to expect that, oh, okay, well, I'm the man, I have to do this. I'm the woman, I have to do this. I think it's setting their expectations when they're young, that it's literally just a matter of this needs to be done. Someone's got to do it.
Yeah. And let's work together to find a solution that works for all of us. The other thing too that is so beautiful too about your grandpa is that that he was willing to let himself be vulnerable and childlike and play and silly and stuff like that too, instead of the, like, you got to be tough, you got to be the man, you got to, like, disciplinarian or whatever and stuff, but that we get to be multifaceted human beings, that we have all of these components, and that it's not just one thing. That, like, and again, I cannot speak for all women, but from my experience and others, that you see a man that cries at a touching movie or, a really special moment in their child's life or something, and that is so profoundly magical and human. And they deserve the right to feel that feeling and to express it and not suppress it because they have to be something that society says they are, and to not bond with their children because they're supposed to be this tough guy or whatever. That we need to allow men to have that softness too. And patriarchy and toxic masculinity have made men so afraid of anything feminine, that you throw like a girl. That's the worst insult we can give, is anything that you walk like a girl, you talk like a girl. That's the worst insult you can give to a man or a boy in society. And so then we expect them to like women and want women. And that leads to the whole of, like, there are a lot of men that really don't like women and almost resent their attraction or need for us in their lives, to serve some purpose for them, because they don't really like us, because they didn't like those parts of themselves. They weren't allowed to have softness and to be kind. And the men that are really secure with themselves and that can let themselves be human and be romantic and not care that kids are mocking them for simping or being whooped or whatever. But, like, can you imagine loving someone so much that you, like, who cares what anyone thinks, or if they mock it? Like, you're the one living the dream if you found that kind of love. And don't let anyone diminish that for you. And I think it's a matter of, like, empowering people to be themselves, instead of conforming to what society or any kind of rules, expectations are.
Right. And, it's not okay to simp for, a woman that you're really attracted to, but it's definitely okay to simp for, like, Joe Rogan or Trump or any number of people who they're just falling over and swooning for. But you can't do that for a woman. And
because a woman's lesser.
Right. And, and this is interesting. Like, I'm going to throw out a plug for a previous guest. Nicole of the Great in the Sack. She just texted me today saying that she did an episode on incels and incel culture, and I'm eager to listen to it. This is going to be something I'll probably listen to on a work trip this week. But I think she's going to dive into a lot of that bitterness, like you're talking about. Like they don't like women, but they want women. They desire women. They need women, but they don't like women because they're not getting what they want to get. But it all comes back to like, okay, but what are you bringing to the table? Like, you're making yourself very clear that you don't like women, but you want a woman to like you. Why would she ever do that? You know?
Yeah. And I honestly, I hate the concept of what do you bring to the table, because then it becomes like this measuring stick of like, your salary, of your house, of your car, of, socioeconomic status versus are you a good human being? Okay. And so like, I think that like what is more important that we bring to the table is, are you emotionally intelligent? Can you communicate effectively? How do you process your emotions? What are your goals and ambitions in life? Do you have basic human decency and compassion? And those are the things that are missing. And I think that the thing that we're seeing with the incels and the 4B movement is an absolute and complete and utter failure of our ability to connect as human beings. And that is the result, is these very polarizing things. And that instead of coming together and trying to understand each other and get to some common ground, it just becomes so much more divisive. And we're seeing that in politics and other things too. And I think that we need to, again, labels can be helpful sometimes, but sometimes they can put us in a box that is restrictive. And we need to step out and be like, I am a human being first. And how do I help other human beings? And, that every human life is worthy and valuable needs to be a fundamental belief of human beings. And if it's not, we have, like, that's sociopathic and narcissistic. Those are not normal, healthy human brains and emotions and behaviors. And they're in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for a reason, because they are dangerous and harmful to society. And so when we emulate and lift up those people in particular as leaders and as the role models for other people, what messages are we sending? What messages are we sending to girls elevating a rapist and sexual predator? And what message are we sending to boys in elevating a rapist and a sexual predator?
Mm-hmm.
The messages are different and very profoundly impactful, and will have lasting consequences and effects, and not in a good way. And it's very disheartening and frustrating to hope and see what human beings are capable of and the capacity for them to learn and create and do beautiful, kind things in this world, and then to have us have such a slide back into this just extremely selfish, greedy, cruel behavior.
And that's, I see what you're saying. I think I have one thing.
I feel a butt. What's the butt in there?
I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, I'm putting an asterisk on this. I'm not correcting you. This is friendly debate.
No, I would love to know. Yeah, absolutely.
I personally feel like I understand the 4B movement a lot more than, and let me rephrase that, not understand, but like I feel the 4B movement is a lot more legitimate than the whole incel thing. Because yes, both it's a breakdown of communication, but one is because you owe me something and I'm not getting it. And the other one is because I don't owe you a damn thing until you fix how you're not treating me like a human being. And I feel like women have given men thousands and thousands of years to do the right thing. And as long as we can get away with it, and again, I'm speaking in generalizations, not all men, but goddamn enough of them.
Yes.
We've been given a chance. And if women are empowered over their own bodies and they have agency over their presence in somebody's life, I think that's a bare minimum qualifier of human dignity, that they can say, I'm not open to allowing myself to be mistreated.
Yes. No, and I appreciate the distinction, because in no way am I comparing them as equitable responses or movements to it. And it's honestly, though, it's almost two sides of the same coin of the breakdown, though, in that men are saying, no, you owe us. You are ours to control and do what we want with. And we've been able to exploit you and control you for so long. And now we can't, and we're upset about it, and we're going to have a tantrum. And then the 4B movement is like, listen, we've accepted things that we should not have for so long. And not one damn thing that we have as women has been given us because of the altruism of men. We have fought for everything that should have been ours from the beginning. And the fact that men cannot see that we are human beings that deserve everything that they do, every right and opportunity. And yes, we're different. I get that. And we celebrate those differences and how they complement each other. And that is great. And that makes for a beautiful and diverse society. But that we have to be able to get to the page of human decency and of equal rights, that we're not trying to control or oppress any other group, that we want what is best for me and everyone else too. And, I think that's a really hard thing. I think a lot of I've talked to friends about the feminist movement, and I have a lot of guy friends. I have always gotten along well with boys and men growing up my whole life, and appreciated their perspective on things, and that was just more my personality. But I also have a lot of them now who know how passionate I am about this and stuff, who are resistant to call themselves feminists. And because there is a negative connotation with that, and that they think that it is equitable to man-hating, and it's not. And so I think that, yes, there are some women that go to an extreme, and it sounds like man-hating, man-bashing, and that is not productive for anyone, and that's not what we want. And feminism at its core is that we just don't believe in the oppression of women because they're women, and that, I think you are either a feminist or you're complicit with the oppression of women.
Yes.
It's that simple for me.
Yes.
And so I think that that men are afraid of identifying as feminist and being on this side because of they think it's taking something for them or not standing up for men, and it's not. And there's going to be extremes in all these things, and there are feminists that are very there's very white feminism, and then there's also TERFs, and there's all of these things, but at its core, feminism is just not about the oppression of women. And those are the things that we need to focus on to be able to come together, not the other things that are just kind of noise and distractive. But it's always the extreme cases that get the most attention. And so we need to bring it back to and for men to proudly say that they are a feminist and not be afraid of that term. I think it's going to take a lot of education and just redefining what it means.
And I think all of it, any of the things like being a feminist or any specific group of people who are advocating for their rights, it literally boils down to see me and treat me as a human being. And yes. It's not that it's the false narrative that this is a zero-sum game, that success and happiness is a zero-sum game. If we redefine success so that your success doesn't need to be taken away from somebody else. If we could allow ourselves to build each other up, and it's possible, it's very doable. It's actually way easier. You just don't have people getting that obscenely wealth hoardy. A lot of this would go away. We're all pitted against each other on this false narrative that we're all competing for a scarce resource that isn't actually that scarce. There's no mine someplace where somebody is picking away chunks of happiness and success from the walls, and it's controlled by the De Beers or something. It's out there. Yeah. You can have that. You don't have to have money to be happy. You don't have to have money to be successful. It sure as hell helps, but that's not why someone's happy. That's not why they're successful. It depends on how you measure it.
Right. I will say, though, that especially in our society, that there has been research done that does quantify that having a certain amount of money is indicative of happiness. Because if you don't have money, you are not free in this country, and you can't afford healthcare, and you can't afford the basic necessities of life. And so there needs to be some kind of basic standard of living that we would want for all people, and that people have a really hard time. Well, they didn't earn it, and I earned it and stuff. And so it's this really frustrating thing of trying to people don't understand the difference between equality and equity. And that, so it's like, if you fall and scrape your knee and I give you a Band-Aid, if I'm going to make it equal, I'm going to go give everyone else in the world a Band-Aid, because then it's equal, right? But they're like, I don't need a Band-Aid. No, you don't. But when you do, I'll give you one. That's equity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and if you're 6'5" and I can't reach the top shelf, and I have to get a stool, that's equity. So that you and I are on equal playing ground to be able to get our needs met and get what we need. I need a stool to reach the top shelf. You don't. But why shouldn't I have a stool? And don't you want me to have a stool so I can reach the top shelf? Like, why? What do I have to do performatively to earn the stool?
Mm-hmm.
And especially when I just am not 6'5". It's not my fault. Why should I be punished?
Right. And, and I'm in a grocery store. At least every other time I go to the grocery store, hey, can you get that for me? And you know what? I don't mind doing it. I don't, because it's just like you were saying, like, why should I be like, oh yeah, you give me $1, I'll get it. Like, no, I'm just going to help you because why not?
Because I can,
right.
Because I'm 6'5" and I can reach it and you can't, and I will help you. And that's the thing that I think it's so interesting and fascinating and frustrating and stuff, that there seems to be like this belief that a lot of people are trying to protect the wealthy because there's this aspiration of they'll be there someday. And I'm like, I hate to break it to you, but you're closer to being homeless than you are to being a billionaire.
Right.
We all are, and so like, they don't care about your loyalty. They don't care about you. They care about your money and that you give it to them. And so this like loyalty to these people is just ridiculous. And that it's like, why don't we have, and again, it's so interconnected with the patriarchy, hierarchy, competition, the consumerism, the hyper independence that I don't need anybody. And so we're just failing in our interconnectedness. Is that a word? Interconnectedness?
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds weird when I say it. Anyway, we're all so interconnected that that we have to realize that we're not in a vacuum. Our actions and everywhere we go has some kind of impact in how we spend our money and how we treat each other, and what systems we want to have in place to be able to best help everyone, not just ourselves.
And I think we need to model that for our kids too. Like, all of this, everything we've said, literally everything we've said in this episode comes back to, how do we install this in our kids? How do we build this into the next generation to not learn the bad habits we did? Like, I didn't unlearn money is the only way to happiness until I was like in my mid-20s. And I grew up broke. Like, I thought once I got a house, and I'm sitting in it, once I got a house, that I was going to feel so rich, and I did. And it was like this moment, I think, that when I got this house, was my moment when I felt truly comfortably okay. And little did I know, I just spent yesterday replacing the entire sink and plumbing in the kitchen. How not necessarily true that is, but like, it felt like a marker of success. I had lived in, apartments and then one rented house, through my entire life. But now I had property. Now I had a place that was mine, and that to me felt wealthy. And to other people, well, they would go, well, your house is cheap and it's, not fancy, and you don't have this car and this other stuff. So you're not, but like, why can't I define that myself, and why can't we should be modeling this for our kids, that they get to decide where their success is, not have it dangled in front of them so they'll work harder and harder for somebody else for less money to be exploited, essentially, to make them wealthy by their standards. But our kids are chasing this idea from somebody else instead of just being able to set their own fixed point. This is where I'm going to feel okay. This is where I'm going to feel like I've succeeded.
Yeah, a lot of that comes down to the narratives that we're taught and socialized, especially in a consumeristic, capitalistic society, where money is what matters most, and that is the highest status symbol that we have. And it's unfortunate because we we judge and compare each other and shame each other for these things and for not dressing a certain way or looking a certain way or having an education or not, instead of thinking about how we can allow for everybody to have those opportunities to be themselves. And not everybody wants the same things. And so why are we allowing this message of what success is be defined for us instead of allowing us to define it for ourselves? And that's not to say that we don't want people to be driven and ambitious and do something that they love, but it's also hindered by the fact that we value things very differently. And so for someone that wants to be a school teacher and you're saying wealth is the ultimate success, those aren't compatible. And so you're going to say that you're going to be a teacher and now you're not the best, you're not successful in our society, you failed somehow. And that's such a harmful message too. And that instead we value athletes and entertainers, and we need to, I am so frustrated that this did not get solidified in everyone's mind from the pandemic and when we were on lockdown, that truck drivers and cashiers are frontline workers and that they are essential to our entire society. Why have we forgotten that?
Yep.
And that we need to value everyone having that. And again, it comes back to just playing to people's strengths, that we need people to do all the different jobs. And if they're just solely motivated by money, we're in trouble because we won't have a balanced society that has people doing all the different things. And that we need to encourage people to play to their strengths. And it can get really weird when you think of like, I'm thinking of the movie Divergent, where they get The Giver, where they get jobs, and so it's like this dystopian society of like trying to assign people to their things and not caring whether that's what they want or not, but that we need to allow people and help them figure out what it is that they are good at and how to help them be able to survive and make a living and doing things that they love and that are contributing to society in a way that they can, and valuing whatever contribution that is as just as equal as anything else, because they're essential.
Oh, yeah. I've told my kids flat out, I don't care if they ever get rich. I just want them to be fulfilled.
Yeah. And that's, I think, a lot of that gets lost in that we need money to survive. And so a lot of times a lot of people have dreams that they gave up to just provide for themselves and their families and stuff. And that's sad. And that we should try and help people be able to do the things that they want and be able to make a livable wage and have a full-time job and be able to live and have some quality of life, that we're just not seeing that. And we think that people need to earn their personhood. And that's really frustrating. Yep.
And then defend it constantly.
Yes. And be trying to one-up it all the time. Like, get a new car. That one's a few years old. Get it. Upgrade your house. Upgrade your ring. Like all these things. But that's the messages that we're getting that are just so bombarding us constantly that we're not good enough. We lack something. Maybe this is it. I'll buy this. This will help. I'll feel happier then. And instead of realizing that it's about celebrating our individuality, our diversity, and the contributions that we can collectively make that make up this beautiful, rich tapestry of a society, instead of expecting and wanting everybody to conform to this, militant model that some patriarchal men have decided is the end all be all of how it should be. And if this moment in history right now is not proof of its failure, I don't think we're going to get a clearer one. We have to do something different.
Yeah. As long as we're chasing the carrot, we're not actually figuring out what makes us happy. Like, that's another thing I've gone on in another episode, or a couple of them enough where I'm probably not going to recover it here, but the idea that we spend so much time chasing someone else's idea of what our life should look like that it usually takes us into our 30s as human beings, at least here in this country, in this society, to figure out what we actually wanted in the first place. And very few times it's what we were supposed to want. Yes.
And I feel like the perfect poster child of that experience. That's what a lot of people are. And that we were indoctrinated with whatever our parents' belief system was. And indoctrination, I know, is an inflammatory word, but it's just the word that it is. And you're indoctrinating your children, I'm indoctrinating mine with the beliefs and the knowledge that we have to try and help them be the best humans that we can. But not everybody has that intent or has that information, and the things that they're teaching can be harmful. And so a lot of us are trying to live up to this standard and expectation that was set for us, that we didn't choose, but it was our normal. And so our survival is dependent on conforming to the group and our sense of belonging, and that's what we are hardwired for. And so we try so hard to fit in, and that causes us harm. And to the point that we get to our 30s and 40s and we end up in therapy depressed and anxious because we don't know who we are or what we want, and everything we did was because it was what we thought we were supposed to do, and that it hasn't resulted in the happiness that we were told it would, or that the fulfillment or whatever, that we're just cogs in this machine of capitalism, and that we don't have the financial freedom that we want, or we have this job. I think of I have another cousin that he has a very specific master's degree in some kind of fish thing, and he lives up in Idaho, and he would work for the state, helping manage their fishing population and stuff, and counting fish and things like that. And he got paid so awful, and has this master's degree that he's worked so hard for. Stuff he quit, and he works for a delivery truck company, like we all know, and because he could make more money doing that, and then he could do what he loves on the weekend and fish. So, but we're not allowing for people to have the quality of life and we need those people to do those jobs still. So we've got to figure out how to value things more equitably, so that we can have the diversity in our society to be successful and not inundated with all people going all into one field. And unless we change things, I don't think many people are going to want to be a teacher. So how do we incentivize that?
Right. We need to value the output, the product, the service, the merit of what's being done, not the profitability of it. I think that is the first step. And we boil everything down. We look in this order. How much are you making? How profitable is this? And then they go, well, if it's nice, it's a nice extra if it's fulfilling. It's stuff that we need done. We need teachers done. We need scientists. We need all of this stuff. And we put so little value on it that you're right. People are going to have a hard time being convinced that they need to go do it.
Right. And the conditions are rough. And I was a special ed TA for a while after my divorce and while I was in grad school. And I saw firsthand, I have friends that are teachers, but I saw more than ever what that entails and how much work goes into that. And that is one of the hardest jobs there is. I commend all the teachers, and they have all my respect and love, and I am fighting for them to have the support that they need and deserve. But I think it's just such an unfortunate thing when we say we want children, and we say we want families, and we say we support women and these things, but then we don't really show that with the things, because we put a monetary value on everything, and we don't think that labor is worth anything. And traditionally, teachers have been women, and that was less than, running a business, and so we didn't. But if you love children and are pro-life and want to help people stay alive, then we would hope that you would want them to have a good education, not just if you can afford an education, but because everyone deserves to have what knowledge we have as human beings and share it. That's what we're all trying to do, essentially, is relate to each other and help pass on the wisdom and knowledge that we have to make it a little bit easier for each other, and to be able to relate and communicate better with each other in a collaborative society.
That's an interesting connection, too, that you brought that up. And I'm going to circle back to the beginning of this conversation, where we were talking about the labor of women being priceless, but also completely valueless.
Yes.
At the same time, and the duality and hypocrisy of it. And I think that you made an interesting connection there between, like, the teachers being historically a woman-filled role, it not being compensated nearly as much. And that kind of like, oh, yeah, okay, maybe that's just what they're supposed to do, and they should, that's fine. They can do that as a hobby or something. That whole dismissiveness and that whole dehumanizing effect of, this isn't worth anything, but we definitely need it done. So,
Yeah. And just the expectation that we'll do it. And here's the thing, though. Women are badass. and we've always stepped up and we've done it. And women now even are collaboratively supporting each other in ways like I am in single mom groups and stuff. And these women are some of the best people on earth, and they are all struggling, and they're the ones that will give each other the most. And it's been the most profoundly humbling and beautiful experience to see that those who have the least are often those who give the most, and that they know what it's like, and that's why. And they don't want other people to have to suffer the way that they have if they can help it. And they will give you their last $20 to help you keep your heat on. Like, we need to care about people more.
Yes.
We just do. And this whole sin of empathy makes me so enraged. And I love Jesus and what he taught and stood for. And that love and that empathy and that radical love and fighting against oppressive systems was what what has shaped who I am, because I loved that so much. And that I am so convinced that, there was the moment that he took to make a whip before he turned the tables over and stuff in anger, and that wasn't sinful if he's the perfect being, that there is this time for righteous anger. And that is now. And it's now because we need to stand up for people that and help each other in ways with just absolute radical love.
And like, I feel like they wrote, like, and maybe I'm going to not make this an I feel statement. I'm going to ask you a question instead. Do you feel like they read a different book than we did?
So, yes, all the time. And especially when they're like talking about putting it in schools and stuff. I'm like, so, the story where the sisters get the dad drunk and stuff, like, that's what you're going to teach kindergartners? Like, you're cool with that? Or like that these kids mock the prophet, calling him Baldy or something like that, and he curses them. And so 2 female bears, which I love that detail, come out of the forest and maul all these kids. Like, that's a great story. Yes. Tell that to kindergartners. Like, I don't know if we read the same book, but we all apparently really missed the same message.
Right. And like, are they going to edit out the Sermon on the Mount like entirely? Are they going to leave in 2 Corinthians 11:12, I want to say? We're talking about like people using God's name. Like, the whole idea of using the Lord's name in vain is not like stubbing your toe and saying, God damn it. It is using the faith for your own profit. And like, how much of the Bible is, I swear that the Trump Bible, the next revision is going to be about 30 pages long. Like, all of the stuff that talks about, like, I just feel like I largely just read a whole different book.
Yeah, I do too. And I will, it's been fascinating. I'm not religious anymore. And I still love Jesus and appreciate everything that he stood for and symbolized, and as a great visionary thinker and a human rights activist. But I really love that. But I've been so, Dan McClellan, he's a Bible scholar, and I've learned so much from him that is so fascinating. And I think that anyone that is religious or not, but should follow his account, because there's just so much that is not being accurately translated or conveyed or misconstrued or interpreted. And he talks a lot about how anytime we read the Bible, we're negotiating with the text. And because people are always so quick to say, well, homosexuality is against my religion because in the Bible, in this one verse, and that, but like, it says you're not supposed to eat pork. Do you eat bacon? And they're like, oh, well, yeah. Well, like, okay. So if we're going to like universally apply all of the rules to everyone, because that's your view, then like you get to live all the rules too. Is that what you want? And that's the whole like disconnect thing, is that like your whole concept is based on free will and agency and choice. And that, but yet you want to dictate what other people's beliefs, lives can be like based on your religious beliefs. And it's so crazy that like religious freedom is dependent on the separation of church and state. If you don't want any religion to tell you what to do, then you can't use your religion to tell anyone what to do either. And that seems to be such a lacking thing, because they're in the Christian nationalist movement, they feel justified in their position as the only right position that they need to enforce on other people. And it's heartbreaking that they missed the message, and that the some of the most atrocious things in all of our history have been carried out in the name of God. And that is misusing the name of God. And
Oh, yeah.
that is just really horrifying.
Well, also, I feel like if you call yourself a Christian, you have to accept that the New Testament was God's redemption arc, and that changes a lot of what was written in the Old Testament, because that's the God that was now, and the New Testament largely transitions to a God of love. And I feel like they just like pick out the parts they want to use, you know? And they just reject all of this love and radical acceptance.
Yeah, it is really frustrating. And again, though, too, that it's like understanding how our brains work and stuff, and that we're insecure and vulnerable and feel safer when we feel like we belong, and that things are the same and predictable and things like that. It's understandable how people can fall into the trap of wanting those things because that feels safer or comfortable to them. And I think something that people need to realize that is every human brain is susceptible to manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't speak in absolutes often, but the way that the human brain works, given the right conditions, everyone is susceptible to manipulation, and we exploit those things all the time in marketing and advertising, in colors that we paint hospitals, in, like, we understand that there's a psychological impact in baking cookies when you're going to an open house, for selling a house. These are exploiting the psychology of the human mind, and we have to be very careful in how we do that we don't cause harm, and thinking that we are above it, that we're smarter than that we can't be tricked, or anything is just wrong, because you are every single day in the things that you buy. We say that you were influenced online to buy this thing. Yeah. What do you think that is? Like, they manipulated your emotions in some way to make you feel like, oh, I need this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, my life is not complete without this thing, or this is better than what I had, or whatever, like, it's just constantly perpetual. And
I was manipulated today.
Aware.
I was manipulated.
Yeah.
I went back to Aldi and got the cinnamon rolls I was debating with myself from getting, because they put those right by the door and you just can't avoid them. Like, I'm sitting here trying to think, oh, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be healthy. This is going to be a healthy shopping run. I literally get home 45 minutes later, I go, nope. And then I go back and get those cinnamon rolls. Like, it's because it's placed right in front of you. It's like they know what they're doing.
Yes.
And it's little things like that, or big things like, your whole entire planning of your life.
Yeah. And it's hard to compare to, but anytime we're trying to make someone feel something, and even this was an interesting and humbling learning experience for me in parenting, was because I grew up the way I did with a lot of guilt trips, and that happened a lot in the religious community that I was in and stuff too, that religion weaponized guilt and shame to get conformity. And so that's what a lot of parents of my parents' generation did. And that's what they knew. And it got the result that they wanted. And so they thought it was good. And, they didn't have ill intent or to be malicious or harmful to their children, but they were just trying to get the desired behavior. And so it was, I had started therapy, and my kids were lying a lot, and honesty is my core value. And I was like, I don't know how to make them understand how serious this is to me, and that, like, it hurts my feelings. And I said these words out loud, and it was like a slap in the face, but I said, I want them to feel bad. And she was like, Amber, the way that you have tortured yourself your whole life to just feel so much guilt and shame is not normal. The fact that your children can recognize they did something wrong and feel bad for a moment and then move on is actually healthy. That's good. You don't want them to just ruminate and feel horrible for making a simple mistake. And it was just such a transformative thing, because, again, our brains will do what we know. And I didn't know how to parent any other way beyond what I was parented, and was trying to change and do something better. I didn't want to result to guilt tripping, which is manipulation, and trying to manipulate their feelings to get what I want. And it is harder. You do end up with kids that are a little more strong-willed because they feel safe with you pushing the boundaries.
Yep.
And it's really awesome. I was, I made our job harder, because my kids will call out your bullshit and manipulation of, like, that's because I said so, or what would Jesus do, and it's like, that's not okay,
Right.
And so, but then you develop this this mutual trust and safety, that they feel that they can come talk to you about anything, which is ideally what we want.
Yep.
And I laugh with my daughter, that her curfew is midnight, and I said, you have a 3-minute grace period, because that's what I did. I had 3-minute grace period. My parents said at 12:03, if I was a minute late, like, I don't know what would happen, but I was too afraid to find out. And so I'm like, okay, be home you get a 3-minute grace period. And I said, but I don't know what happens after that. So you might have to drive down to my parents and ask my dad. And that, because we just have this mutual respect and understanding, and she's a good kid and she's not trying to like push the boundaries or rules, whatever. But if she's 5 minutes late, who cares, but
Right.
we just and it's like feeds into our ego with like the controlling aspect of it. And, that we're the parent and we have to do in charge, and we need to get this obedient behavior. And that's another thing too that I think is frustrating a lot in religion and stuff too, was the obedience factor was so profoundly emphasized. And that a lot of times when parents say now that like kids should respect their parents, what they actually mean is obey.
Yeah.
And that's different than respect. And that there is a basic level of respect, but beyond that, it's earned. And that's the sense of safety you build with your child.
And I think it's important to demonstrate, too, that respect is a two-way thing with the kids. And something that's really worked with mine is just being very open and honest about things. One of which is that I'm making this up as I go along, and that our second kid definitely reaps the benefits of the trial and error with the first kid.
Yeah.
But two concepts that might be helpful that I've learned with my kids is I've reframed levels of harshness by saying, you guys are teaching me what works. And if you teach me that being this harsh is what works, well, then that's what I'm going to have to keep doing. So if you teach me that doing this works and you prefer this instead, okay, I'm going to learn that this is what I should be doing. And then the other one is, we went through our lying phase here too. And the, how did I put it? That a lie is just a loan on the future. Because eventually it's going to come out. So the question is how much interest is it going to gain by the time it comes out? Things like that. But just being honest with them and explaining why something, instead of just like, hey, just do this, has actually really gained a lot of traction for them. How do I want to put it? Not like complying all the time, but at least working towards a common goal. And,
that mutual respect of trying to understand each other, not judge each other. And I think too that it's just, kids, they're learning and they're going to push boundaries, and we're learning as parents and stuff. And so it's going to be messy, and there's going to be things that we need to figure out and stuff that work for that kid that won't work for the other kid, and that, we can do. And we all are learning together at the same time, and we need to be able to allow each other that grace of learning. And that's what builds the mutual respect and stuff. And so that like my kids, and we talk about absolutely everything, because I didn't want there to be guilt and shame around anything, any topic. I wanted it to be very normal, until the point that there was no embarrassment or shame or anything, that we could openly talk about anything, because I want them to come to me when they need help as an adult, not have to just flounder on their own. And the thing is that, so in terms of the lying and stuff too, this was something that was really hard, because I have a child that has autism and ADHD, and lying can be an automatic thing for them very often, because their brain will just say it without thinking, because it feels like the most safe thing to do in the situation. And so I needed to take the fear of punishment or discipline or being caught in the lie out of the equation if we were going to change this behavior, right? And so I gave this kid the opportunity, because we know when they're lying. Like, they think they're so smart. We know. And so I'd say, do you want to try again? And so, and it would be this moment of reflection of no, that's not what I said or did or whatever, so that they could come clean and tell the truth with zero consequence. That was the point. And so then we could break the behavior, the that neural pathway had become so strong and thick and automatic that we needed to do something different to break the behavior, to be able to rebuild new neural pathways that were healthy. And without that fear that is just so intense in the way that their brain worked and differently, and just survival instinct and stuff, like we don't want to be in trouble. And so it was just taking that out. And there are better ways to get the desired behavior than to force it, that it's giving people the opportunity to learn and do better and accommodating them in ways that their brain works, and understanding that, because we have so much neurodivergence and stuff that we're aware of now, and we're better able to help and support kids that have these neural differences, that we can play to their strengths and learn so much. And it's not hard when you learn different ways to accommodate, to teach these different things with compassion instead of force, and that they're different tools and things to help kids with their emotional intelligence and learn to regulate their nervous system and all of those things in healthy ways. But the thing is kids are learning, and so there's going to be tantrums. Like, we've all had a 2-year-old and that's just, they're learning, and we need to allow for that process to be a human experience throughout our lives, not this expectation that we ever arrive at being perfect, because we won't, but giving people the grace and compassion to mess up and try again and learn better and do better.
So I have 3 questions, and these are my loose ends from the entirety of the podcast, of the episode that we had. You had mentioned something about something called fair play, and I'm curious to hear what that is, because I want to go look that up.
Okay, so this is something that I see a lot in the world of women right now, especially like my age demographic and stuff, that have been in relationships for a while, and that we were raised in a very strict gender role society, as most people here in the United States have been and stuff, but particularly in religious communities and stuff, that the roles were very defined. And so, but that's not working in our society anymore, and that not a lot of parents can afford to have a stay-at-home parent that would meet those things. And then, then we punish those parents, like I was, for choosing to do that if they need help later on. And so what we run into is that we have these women that are burnt out doing everything, and the men that are like, I didn't know that's how you felt, and like, it's always been this way, and it wasn't a problem until you brought it up, and all these things. But Fair Play is a book, and then they have some like cards that you can get. You can look them up. They have an Instagram account and everything. There was even a documentary, I think, on Hulu. I'm not sure on that one. But it's Fair Play, and it's brilliant work, and it's given people the language to understand and explain what the mental load is. Because women have been, and we're just like, oh, well, women can multitask and they can just do it, and they're superwomen and stuff. And we're like, no, like, it's killing us. It's so heavy, and we need help carrying this. And that, like, then we laugh and mock at the dads. They're like, so when's your kid's birthday? And he's like, I don't know. What's your kid's teacher's name? I don't know. And so that's weaponized incompetence too. And like, you would never be caught dead being so incompetent in your job. Why are you doing this in the most important task you have of your relationships with your partner and your children? And if we want a thriving society, that's where we need to focus. And the way that they're trying to do it is to force families to exist without giving them tools to do it in a healthy way and be able to communicate and to collaborate. And that this Fair Play in particular has been very beneficial for heterosexual couples with the rigid gender roles and stuff, to take and reevaluate all of that, to have it be a more equitable relationship, and to have a task from inception to completion. Like, you're throwing the kid a birthday party because I have a work trip, and being able to give that to your spouse, your husband, and know that it will be taken care of, instead of having to like nag or remind, right? That we demonize women for reminding men, and we shouldn't have to remind men. And that the same responsibility and effort that they put into their careers is not put into their homes and families and marriages, and that's why they're falling apart. And that's essentially what's leading to a lot of the incel and 4B movement is that we're just so far apart in being able to relate to each other and make things work. And this is giving the foundation and tools and language to be able to do that.
Right. And I feel like a job isn't going to be there at the end of your life to like comfort you and bury you. Like, are you,
No.
you're alienating your kids for the sake of your work. What are you doing?
Yeah. But then we still have, though, this expectation of that, well, where's your family? And they should take care of you, and especially women. And the thing that's really frustrating is, to me, people are like, well, you should go live with your family. You should go, whatever. And I'm like, that's not an option. They don't want me. They won't help me. And so what am I supposed to do? Not everybody has this family. And we shouldn't expect people to be loyal to abusive situations either.
Yes.
And so we need to account for that if it's an unsafe place for people to go, they still deserve help and support and compassion in those things. And that it really is frustrating because you put your whole life into this career to climb this corporate ladder or whatever you're doing to make all this money. And then you're on your deathbed and it means nothing. And you were replaced yesterday,
Right.
like you're expendable. But these relationships, I honestly think, and especially in deconstructing religion and everything that I grew up with, the only thing that matters in this life, the only thing is how we treat each other as human beings.
Yes.
If there is a God that is going to judge me on anything, it's going to be that, because that is evidence of my character, and not that that I made a ton of money and did nothing good with it, or that I hoarded it and bought 5 vacation homes, or
right. We were
whatever,
we were going to let you into heaven, but your Q4 sales stats really just sucked. So see ya.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating, again, especially because there is kind of like the prosperity gospel thing too, that is another element of the Christian nationalists and Christian religions and stuff too, that is frustrating because they're so intertwined because of, that you give money to the church and you'll be blessed monetarily is kind of the very basic premise, right?
Right. Well, if you're rich enough, you can just buy a really, really, really big needle, and you can just take a very small camel through it. Oh,
of course. Yeah. You can rig the system if you have that kind of money, and so it's really frustrating, all of this stuff. But again, I think it just comes down to that we're struggling to relate to each other as human beings and lacking that human connection. And we didn't learn that lesson from COVID lockdown, where every job was valuable and where touch starvation became a thing at the forefront that a lot of us single people are very aware of, that we need human touch and human connection in very, even, just platonic ways, that you have friends that you love and give a hug to and support and say hi to, and being in another human's presence. And that this is what our brain is hardwired for, and the fact that we're failing at it so miserably is manifesting in all of these different ways. That is a collapse of society as we know it, because we focused and prioritized other things above human connection and individual well-being.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm going to ask one unifying question that is probably the hardest question so far.
Okay.
And just to kind of bring everything together, because we're getting kind of long, and this might be a two-parter. How would you define femininity and masculinity in the framework of how you demonstrate it to your kids?
Okay, that's a really great question. First of all, I do think it's a difficult concept to limit it to what we define as feminine versus what we define as masculine, because that can be debated. But it's also a really interesting thing, because I think the focus should be more on humanity and self-expression. Something that we learn a lot too, and especially that I've been educated on by the queer community and the trans and non-binary community particularly, is that people don't often understand there's a difference between sex and gender expression, and that most people that are cisgender heterosexual people, and a lot, just tend to miss that concept entirely because it's not their experience, but that they focus on genitalia and what you're doing with it and with who. And you're like, I think you're missing the point. You really are. It is not about sex. It is not about that at all. And what we're talking about is people being free to be who they are and express themselves. And one of the great thought leaders that I love following is Alok. And they have a beard and wear bright, colorful dresses and earrings and have the most beautiful. Another one is Jeffrey Marsh. But they've taught me so much of just what it is to be a good human and to allow people to be people if they're doing nothing that is harming anyone, and they get to be free to express themselves in the magical way that they were created, and that it brings vibrance and perspective to our world that is really necessary and beautiful. That we have to be able to challenge the beliefs that we were given and indoctrinated in our youth, as we get older and learn better and do better. That just because that was your belief when you were younger doesn't mean you have to double down on it. That doesn't make you better or a good person, because you can't change your mind or abandon your belief, but you learned and you can change your mind and you can do differently. And I think we need to humanize these issues and focus on that. But what we traditionally consider to be feminine and masculine kind of feels irrelevant to me. And that being said, like, I am a very sorry, I just got a really dry throat. Hold on.
Well, that's where we're. Yeah,
out.
I've got my glass here too, and I've gone through both my cider and my water.
I'm almost out of my water. But anyway, I was just gonna say that I identify as a very feminine woman, and that when I was deconstructing religion and purity culture and patriarchy and all of those things in my mid-30s, that was something that I had to decide, do I like this pretty necklace and this long hair, or was that what was expected of me? And am I straight, or is it bad for me to be gay but it's okay for other people? Like, do I have internalized homophobia and I need to address that? Or am I straight? And is that okay? And I don't think a lot of people really do that kind of introspective work, because they maybe do align with what they were taught, and their sex, gender, and gender expression can fall within the binary without question. And so it doesn't generally disrupt their lives. But this was something that I really wanted to understand for myself. And that just because I really love jewelry and I really love makeup and long hair and stuff, like, that's who I am. And I finally got to figure out for myself that that's what I want, not because that's what anyone told me or expected of me, but I was choosing it. And I think that's been a really important place to get to in terms of all of these things, and allowing people to do the same. Because how someone dresses or speaks or does their hair just does not affect you. And that our bodies are honestly the least interesting thing about us. And that we have to allow for that diversity and expression and celebrate it instead of demonize it because it's not our style or our taste or whatever. Like, it's just differences. And, men can wear dresses, but only if it's a kilt or a sarong in Tahiti or something. Like, we have these weird rules depending on culture and society and stuff. But, like, what if we just let people be who they are when it's hurting no one?
And you can wear your ring if you're a man. That's okay, but you wear a gaudy bracelet but it's not okay unless it tells you the time. Then it's fine.
Yeah. And we just have these silly little rules, and it all essentially a lot of it comes down to, like, authoritarianism and control and conformity. And honestly, that's kind of scary and stuff. And a lot of that we saw in terms of, like, eugenics with Hitler and stuff, and trying to make the superior Aryan race and eliminating diversity and trying to claim that this was superior when it's not. And we need to learn this lesson and not be threatened by other people that are different than us, but be curious. And you can be kind and ask questions, and people are good, and go online and be responsible for your own education. don't wait or expect somebody in that community to do the emotional labor for you.
Yes.
But open your eyes. And that's the thing, though, that's so frustrating. And I appreciate all the educators and activists online and stuff for educating us and doing that work, because it's hard, because we need something to wake people up. And oftentimes that takes until about our 30s for us to wake up to the systems and have this kind of cognitive dissonance of who we are and what the life we're living is, and not seeing or feeling the fulfillment we thought we would have at owning a house, and realizing that home ownership is kind of overrated and that it's a money pit and something's always breaking and all those things. Like, we need to redefine all of those things for us, and especially what masculine and feminine means. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, because I think
Okay.
you took it was kind of a long explanation, but a worthy one.
Sorry, I'm not known for being succinct.
No, that's fine. That's actually, because yes, it would be horrible if this podcast was 5 minutes. This is great. I'm not going to begrudge you not only hearing a bunch of things that I didn't know about, but you take your time and explain it to me. I actually appreciate that. But what I was going to say is, the way it sounds like you're instilling an open mind and critical thinking in your kids is a good way to make sure they don't waste 30 years of their lives trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And I will say, like, being able to watch my kids, and it's been remarkable. And one of the things that in the religion that I was in, we couldn't show our shoulders. And after I left religion, I wore a shirt that had jumpsuit that was an off-the-shoulder thing for our family pictures with my kids, and it was going to be on our Christmas card, and I was scared, and I didn't want to offend people and stuff, and it was classy and elegant. I loved it and stuff, but we left, and my daughter turned to me and she said, "I'm so proud of you." And so, like, to watch her not have that shame and recognize the hurt that it caused me has been so beautiful and healing. And this is the work, and this is what therapy is for, and this is what being human is, and that we can help each other survive this life and do better and be okay. And I just am so passionate and driven about helping people do that and be able to have the tools in their relationships to be as happy and successful as possible.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for trusting me with your story today. And it was going to be a simple conversation about parenting, and it went in so many wonderful tangents. And this is
so many directions.
Yes, and that's not a bad thing at all. Like, I love it when this happens, because the whole point of this is conversation and getting a chance to meet people. And I feel like I've met you on this conversation today in a much more full way than we've just been going back and forth talking in private messages. And I really appreciate you sharing that part of yourself with me and to the larger audience as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and stuff.
Yes.
I appreciated learning from you, and I appreciate that you're using your privilege to speak, because whether we like it or not, there are times when your voice will hold more weight than mine. And I am deeply grateful for you for recognizing that and using that, and for stepping up and doing something and not waiting for someone else to do it. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I will always be happy to get loud and get noticed and then yield to someone who really does need to be heard.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity and the work that you're doing, and think it's an honorable and noble thing to be able to try and help people to see this, so that we can come together and not be so divided. I just, really quick before we wrap up and stuff, just one more time, that book, that, because we started talking about parenting and stuff.
Yes.
And not necessarily that it relates to feminism, but just having empathy and compassion as a human being, and being able to allow all children to have emotions, not suppress their sadness for crying or anything. But it's John Gottman's book called How to Raise an Emotionally Intelligent Child.
Okay. And then you mentioned Dan McClellan. Is that something that you wanted to talk about?
Dan McClellan is a Bible scholar. I just think his work is fascinating, especially because, like, I grew up really in a really high demand religion, and studied scripture every day of my life, and graduated from seminary and stuff. Like, it's I know it pretty well, and I've just learned so much from him, and I think it's important and valuable, especially when there is a movement that is trying to make policy based on it. And as he is a religious Christian man, and so I think that will hold more credibility to him. But even as I'm not religious and stuff, I appreciate that he has spent his life learning this and has the expertise to share what he's learned. So I think he's a really valuable person to follow on social media.
Right on. And we'll put all this stuff in the show notes too, so if you wanted to send that to me, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.